in the audience, there's going to be some people that might not be technical or might not have been technical for that long. And I try to keep it as open as possible and as understandable as possible as well. I didn't want to go into too many technical details in terms of that. So industry trends. The first question I basically asked myself, how do I get this thing to click? There we go. The first question I asked myself when I got assigned this topic was basically why. I mean, of all things out there, why industry trends? Why is it important for people to know these things? And I mean, it is important. I think no one can deny that fact. You sort of have to know the history of it all. So where it came from, where it is at the moment. And also that's the only way you can sort of figure out where things are going, by listening to the conversations and sort of following that history trend and trying to see how things happen from that side. But then the second portion of that question was, why me? Why am I doing industry trends when I can be doing some interesting things like Cloud Bolt or Kubernetes from that side? And it sort of dawned on me, listen, I've been in the IT industry for a little over 21 years now. I've sort of started off where most of the IT guys started off with desktop support and doing basic IT services for other customers. At some point, I even had my own little company where I did desktop support after hours, which was a pain in the ass, but I did those. And I think with that sort of background going all the way back for the last 20 years and where things are right now, it's probably not a bad idea for me to sort of look at industry trends and try and see if there's any opinion I can sort of make in terms of that and see if how that bounces off the rest of the guys. So I thought of starting, I had this whole elaborate idiom in my mind around wheels and how things are formed after the invention of the wheel and those are the things. So I had this long story. I didn't want to go through the story because I thought it might just be a waste of time for everyone. And I know everyone's probably looking at this wheel, scratching their head, thinking, where am I going with this? So just bear with me. It will become clear at some point. So a couple of, well, during the Stone Ages, there was this one guy that obviously got quite tired of carrying these heavy stones around, and he sort of made it into a circle and he rolled it. And eventually he figured out that, listen, there could be more use cases for this. We could actually start using this in more productive ways to make life a lot easier. And that was the invention of the wheel, really. So he went and he spoke to his friends and his family and he showed them this, and they all got very excited and they started building various things from there. So obviously, in my opinion, the very first use case of the wheel was probably like a wheelbarrow and a carriage to carry things around and move things from one spot to the other spot. And that actually worked quite well. So this oaks happily sold these wheels to these guys and they built the tools and they sort of made their lives a lot easier. But as the years progressed, people came up with different ideas. So these guys that you're looking at here are farm workers. So they decided that they would create a service out of this. So now the farmer doesn't have to worry about these wheelbarrows and these carriages or even the wheels. And as a matter of fact, he doesn't have to worry about any of these guys either, because all he's really after is the end product, and the end product is the produce that he produces on his farm. So when he sells that to the customer has no inclination of these farm workers, no inclination of these tools that they used to use with wheels. It just made no difference to them. They were just after the end product, which is the produce. Now, to put that into perspective, if you look at the wheel, that's basically infrastructure as a service. So that's where we've been playing for a long period of time. I mean, that's your CPU, memory, and disk, and it creates the base of where everything runs on top of. We sort of slowly but surely started morphing into a company that does managed IT services. So we take those wheels, we build services out of it, and we manage it for customers. So the customer no longer have to worry about the wheels or even the tools for that matter. They just get the tools from us. The next level up from that obviously is the platform as a services stuff. So this is the sort of stuff we've been talking about very recently as well, where we trying to create a database platform and we're trying to do database services for customers. In my honest opinion, platform as a service is really just advanced managed services, because what it would entail is you look after the infrastructure, the operating system, and the application. The customer just gets that application. But in the end, all of this sort of feeds to one common goal, which is the solution. And that's what the customer's after. The customer, he doesn't care about these guys here doing your platform services. He doesn't care about these tools that's involved from a managed IT services perspective. He doesn't really care about the infrastructure at the moment anymore either. At a point they did. It sort of built on from this. Initially, everything was infrastructure. Then everything became managed IT services. And now it's at a point where it's becoming platform services, and it's sort of leading to a point where everything's going to be solution based and the customer couldn't care less about the rest of those things. So I don't know what my next slide is. Um, I wanted to also sort of give my idea of what happened from this aspect. So I remember as a youngster doing IT back then, when you walked into a company, every single company had basically they had these three things. They might have other things as well, but these were the three basic things that every single one of them had. They had file servers. They had web service for just to have a bit of a web presence, and they had mail services. So if you look at those three services, it's basically built around internal IT. Those things were to serve the employees of the company, really, more than the customers of the company. It gave you a place to share your stuff, well, to store your stuff, share it on that file server, and then potentially mail it out to your customers. So these were all internal facing IT technologies. And if you look at what's happening in the market at the moment, file servers are being replaced by tools like Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, Filer. Um, Honestly speaking, since I've joined EOH back in, well, I can even go further back than that. Since I joined Vodacom in 2008, I've never ever touched a file server since then. I've always used file services. And I think a lot of the guys on this group suddenly also realize this now, that we don't have a file server in our business unit. In fact, I don't even know if there's a file server living somewhere in EOH at all, because everything is sort of done via either SharePoint or OneDrive or Google Drive. When it comes to the web services side of things, all of those tools got replaced by services that you can find in Google, AWS, and Azure. There's a hell of a lot more to it than just those. I'd simply list those three because those are the three that we support. But if you go and do a search, you can find web hosting services where you can build web service, design it, and they host it for you. You simply have to point your DNS to it, and you've got an up and running website. I mean, a good example, and this is something to try when you have a second, if you're interested in creating a website. If you go to sites.google.com, you'll be amazed at how easy it is, even for a non-technical person, to set up a website in minutes. And there's a lot of those. And I mean, that one's a free one. So that's where that went. From a mail server perspective, I don't think anyone would sort of doubt the fact that that's basically going one of two ways. It's going Office 365 or it's going Gmail at this stage. So what I'm trying to get at is all of these traditional IT services that people used to run in their basic IT shop inside their little server room, or maybe that was before we had data centers. All of those typical servers are going away. So from a sales perspective, if I was a salesperson, I would go and look at the customers that's got file servers, go and sell them something like Google Drive, or look at someone that's got a mail server, go and sell them either Gmail or Office 365, because those are really where we are adding value quite quickly for a customer when they let go of all of that infrastructure stuff. They let go of the wheel, they let go of the wheelbarrow, they let go of the managed services, and they get an end result. They get a product, they get a solution. So that's where that's going from that side. I wanted to spend a little bit of time on the discussions as well, because I've had numerous discussions with customers over the years of everything as well, and it's drastically changed over the years. Initially, everyone was talking about physical hardware, CPU, memory disk in a server, HPDL 380s, those sort of things. It soon changed when virtualization came in. Then people started looking at VMware, and they started talking about virtual CPU, memory, and disk, and how to manage and maintain these things. Once all of that got sorted out, the conversation started moving to operating system. So what operating system do you run? Do you run Windows or Linux? And if it's Linux, which distribution of Linux? What do you do with it? Shortly after that, people started talking about applications. Which applications do we run? What are we doing from that aspect? And how do we manage and maintain and monitor these things? After that came the management conversation. So customers got to a point where they no longer wanted to look after these things themselves. They couldn't care less about physical hardware, virtual hardware, OS, or application. They want someone to manage it for them. And that's basically where we play at the moment. So if you look at the stack that I've sort of built up there, we've sort of come a long way in terms of where IT has sort of moved to from that aspect. But obviously from there, the next step is software as a service and packaged solutions. So a lot of these big vendors like Oracle, SAP, and CA and the likes, they no longer give you the software to go and install. Well, they still do, but at some point they're going to stop giving you the software to install it on a server, and you're going to go to a web page and you're going to log in with your credentials, and that's your application. So that's where that's moving to. But with that, obviously CIOs get bored quite often, because the more it moves up the stack, the less they have to do and the less they have to worry about. So they start looking at compliance and security solutions. They keep themselves busy with that. And that's a very important topic of discussion in any cloud platform at the moment. I've got a slide a little bit later on that sort of goes through the top concerns that CIOs have with cloud platforms. And it centers around compliance, governance, security, and costs for that matter. But what I'm really seeing with the conversations I'm having with customers and vendors at the moment, because I know you guys don't see me on King's Landing as often as I want to be, and I'd actually feel quite bad about that. But the reason why I'm not there is because more often than not, I'm in customer meetings, talking to customers about different things, and sitting in vendor meetings, talking to vendors about how do you do X, Y, and Z, and what's the new trends, and where are we going, and what are they doing in terms of that. And what I've realized is that things have changed since this pandemic started, where traditionally IT was sort of all based on the internal requirement that a business might have, like I showed you earlier, the web servers, the file servers, and the mail server type of thing, where it's moved from that to more like a custom application thing. I've had conversations, and it's funny how it happens as well, though, because I've been in a lot of conversations with Mary Lynn Roth, and she always, when she speaks to a customer, she's got cloud, which is me. She's got someone from app dev, which is typically Louis, and then she's got someone from data, which typically ends up being Varsha. And when they talk about when they talk about solutions on their side, it doesn't, the cloud conversation hardly enters the room. They don't talk about that anymore. They talk about this application and that application, and using this technology and that technology, and they don't even mention, okay, it's on AWS, or it's on Google, or it's on Azure. That's sort of that's a topic for another discussion. Once they've sold the product, then they go and figure out where they want it. Customers don't care about where these things are. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that customers now, more often than not, are looking at custom apps. It's typically apps that they design for their customers. I actually got, let me just go to the next thing here. So originally IT was used for internal use, as I sort of explained just now. It shifted in 2012. Well, it started shifting earlier, but I think there was a big boost for it in 2012, where it started focusing more around customer-centric views. There was a dawn of DevOps and custom applications for our customers. Good examples of those are guys like Takealot and Leroy Merlin. So if you go to Takealot or to Leroy Merlin for that matter, and you try and sell them a file server or CPU, memory, and disk, or a web server, or something like that, these guys will laugh at you. They will laugh at you in your face. They're not interested in that. They're interested in stuff that adds value to their customers. So, I mean, I know got Leroy Merlin on there, but another good example is also like Builders Warehouse. If you go and look at their websites, you can now, there's a full e-commerce website behind it. It's the same as Takealot. You can go onto their thing, you can download the app and go and buy things off a hardware store. That's a hardware store. It's no longer just IT and software companies doing this. These are hardware companies doing this. And you can buy a hammer off their website and they get it delivered to you without you having to even leave your house or pick up the phone. And that's where conversations are going to when you speak to these customers. Let me move to the next one. Another thing that I've been playing with quite heavily in the past, and there's a good reason for this as well, though, and I'll get to that, is the difference between containers and virtual machines. So I sort of got my teeth stuck in that because I found it very, very interesting, and I wanted to find out exactly what this is about. And if you look at the two different stacks that we have here, so on the left-hand side, this is your typical virtualization stack. We have physical hardware, you've got a hypervisor installed, which could be either VMware or Microsoft Hyper-V. And then if you need an application, you would go and install a little server, which has got a guest operating system. You install your application on top of that. You need a second app. There we go. New server, new application. Third app, install a new server, new application. Where containerization changes that completely is you no longer have the hypervisor and the guest OS portions in the middle of that. So you would typically just have your physical hardware, you have the operating system running on top of that, and then the applications just sort of feed into that operating system from a container perspective. There's a couple of nice things about it. So the one nice thing about that is the fact that it's less resource intensive. You can run applications and it doesn't take up, you don't need a full CPU or full gig of memory. It uses what the operating system provides as well. So that's quite nice. And the other thing that I really like about it is the fact, so in my mind, containerization is probably cloud 3.0. That's where everything's going to eventually go to. And the reason why I'm saying that is because it's the truest form of agnostic cloud computing that's around at the moment. I mean, everything is in a standard format. So you can go and look at Red Hat OpenShift. You can go and look at Google's GKE environment, Amazon's AKS environment. No, that's Azure's AKS environment, or Amazon's EKS environment. You can go and look at Rancher Kubernetes engine. They all run the same they all run the same code. I mean, they've got different names, they've got different brandings to them, but they all work exactly the same. If you have an application running on Red Hat OpenShift and you want to move it from your on-site Red Hat OpenShift into Google Kubernetes engine, so GKE, you simply move it. It literally is as simple as that, and it just carries on working exactly as it worked in everything else. I mean, where that's different to virtual machines is, I think if you speak to any one of the VMware guys that's ever had to just do a basic transformation of a Hyper-V machine into VMware, they will tell you it's not an easy thing. It's not something that is advised by either one of those companies, and they would sort of advise strongly against it for that matter. So that's where the containerization makes things a hell of a lot easier. There's also been, I mean, there's a lot of headway being made. That's why you saw I had all of those Red Hat tabs open earlier. So if you look at what Red Hat's doing in the market at the moment, they've formed a partnership with the big three. They've got a partnership now with Amazon, they've got a partnership with Azure, they've got a partnership with Google, where you can get a managed Red Hat OpenShift environment on any one of those clouds. And the funny thing is, it's actually cheaper doing it that way than having it on site. So just give me a sec. So funny thing is, and I think this is part of why I'm so excited about the container side as well, though. So I've been in this week alone, I've had 3 conversations with 3 massive customers around containerization, where they want us to show them what we can do and show them what it looks like and how it works. And these are not conversations that I seek out, to be deadly honest. I mean, I think everyone knows my strong point is basically VMware and CloudBolt. But these conversations are seeking me out at the moment. And there's a lot of noise around it, and I think this is quite a good spot to play in. Let me just move to the next slide. So you guys must just jump in if you need to ask me anything. Yeah, I'm just going to mute you.
Japie, actually on that point of the containerization side of things, on CRM, mustn't forget about doing that. I must make a note of it.
Yeah, that's right. Sue, I keep on putting you on mute because for some reason it goes unmute, makes a noise, and then it just disappears again. So this next slide, yes, I need to try and mute this. There we go. So this next slide, this was actually stolen from Red Hat. So Red Hat sent me their presentation that I saw the other day, and I found this to be quite an interesting one, and it sort of leads towards what I was just saying as well. So they talk about 2 different environments. They talk about legacy VM environment, which is basically where we play from our CloudBolt perspective at the moment. And they talk about cloud native environment. And this is what they're seeing is happening in the market. A lot of the customers are, at the moment, most of the customers are on this aspect here, where there's a lot of VMs and so it's cloud. So the cloud native stuff is what they deem as containers, just so make sure everyone understands it. So they're seeing most of the customers being here at the moment, where they've got a lot of legacy stuff, which is VMs, and starting to adopt the containerization. And as time progresses, they see it's sort of shifting to where you're going to have a lot less VMs and a lot more things running on a container platform. And honestly, I think that is pretty true, and that gives us that actually gives us quite a big opportunity on our side, because we have uh, the certifications on AWS, we have the certifications on Google, and we are busy getting the certifications from a Microsoft perspective as well. I know we have a couple, but we are getting some more on this side at the moment. And all of these guys already have that managed, all of those three providers already have that managed Red Hat OpenShift environment. They all have their own native Kubernetes environments. So this is quite a good opportunity for us to make sure that we that we tell customers we have the capability to help them with these things. This is another slide that I stole from them, and there's quite a nice reason why I stole this one as well. So in this slide, they basically said that 63% of organizations are already hybrid today. And they're saying 54% of the outstanding customers are planning to be hybrid in the next 24 months. So let's just quickly explain what hybrid is I don't know if someone might not know what it is. So hybrid basically means you're running in one of two forms. So you're running maybe a couple of machines virtually, some of them in public cloud, or maybe you've got a couple of things in private cloud and others in public cloud, or maybe you're using more than one public cloud. So it's basically just meaning that you've got the best of both worlds. So maybe a private and a public, so a combination of things. That's basically what hybrid means. It means combination. And the reason why I said this slide is quite interesting to me, and why I wanted to present the slide as well, is because I started thinking about our very own company. And by our own company, I don't mean Ayoko Cloud and security. I mean EOH Group. They never had a plan to become a hybrid company. At the moment, they fully hybrid. They got stuff running on our cloud platform. They got stuff running on Azure. They got stuff running on AWS. So they fully hybrid, but that was never one of their plans to become fully hybrid. And you're going to find more and more of those customers, more and more of those big enterprise companies that has things running on multiple cloud platforms. And they might have things running on VMs. They will also have things running in Kubernetes. They will also have things running that's completely serverless on their side. And that's really where we can add a ton of value from that aspect, because typically when that happens, and we've seen this within our own organization, and bear in the back of your mind that our own organization is the biggest IT company in sub-Saharan Africa. We have all of the skills, but even with us having all of the skills and having all of the know-how, they found themselves in a position where things weren't set up according to best practice, where things are more expensive than they should be. There's a lot of optimizations to be done. There's security concerns. There's all of these things. And that's where there's a massive project that we're busy with at the moment, just for those of you who don't know, where we're cleaning out a lot of these things. We're trying to save them costs, trying to consolidate things, trying to use platform services as opposed to VM services. So there's a lot of professional services that goes into that. And from a customer perspective, if you speak to some of those bigger companies out there, you'll find a similar trend, where they might not even know that they got a hybrid setup. They got stuff running all over the show in multiple cloud environments, and it's not set up correctly. There's actually another customer that we spoke to a while back as well, that I know Emin's busy working with, a company. Well, Emin and Ian is busy working with them. It's a company called Masthead that had their stuff in Azure set in Azure a good couple of years back. But unfortunately, back then, it was just a cloud platform. No one really knew about best practices and security and concerns and those sort of things. So now they're looking at us to sort of help them get this thing into a state where it's set up in a better fashion. So you're going to find a lot of those opportunities from that side. Okay, this is a very busy slide, and I apologize for that. But the reason why I wanted to show this is because I found a lot of interesting insights out of this as well, though. If you look at, sorry, if you look at this section right here, you'll see what they're predicting, though. So the dark blue is current, and the light blue is basically what they're saying will happen in the next 18 months. So non-cloud is definitely shrinking. Everything else on this side is basically cloud at some form. So software as a service, you can see they expect that to grow by 10%, which is actually quite big. Infrastructure as a service, there's still some growth. There's, like I keep on saying to the technical team as well. I mean, I know we're talking about moving up the stack and starting to do things at a higher level, creating solutions for customers as opposed to infrastructure services. And that's definitely where the industry is going, and that's where we need to be focusing at the moment. But we also need to realize in the back of our minds that infrastructure will never go away completely. It never, well, maybe at some point, but it'll be long after I either resign or I die. I think it's going to be around for a hell of a long time still to come, but the conversations are definitely changing. Infrastructure is becoming more commoditized at the moment, where you can buy infrastructure. So look at our infrastructure. So if you look at the IOCO cloud, we typically run VMs. That's what we do. And if you compare that to like an AWS, for instance, that's EC2. AWS has a ton of extra features. We only do the EC2 portion of it. But that said, it is an important portion, and it's probably still their biggest selling factor at this stage, as with us. And I do foresee this happening for a good number of years to come still. But the conversation will be changing. The conversation won't be infrastructure. Conversation is going to be end result, which is the solution. And then obviously on this side, you can see that platform services also has a rise. This middle section I also found very, very interesting, because they started talking about the cloud adoption rates. And you can see from a cloud computing perspective, that's where the biggest rate is. So that's typically your infrastructure as a service stuff. But like I said, infrastructure is just that. It's infrastructure. It's people do stuff on the infrastructure, but they still use the infrastructure. But you can see the cloud computing portion is actually growing quite well, with all the other things sort of dwindling down from that aspect. I mean, even the Internet of Things at some point, that sounded like that would be a big boom for everyone, but it's still just tracking along, just making a little bit of headway from there. And then the governance. So this is what I was alluded to earlier when I spoke as well, though. So in terms of governance and compliance and the concerns that CIOs have when moving to the cloud. So this is not the latest slide. This thing says 2019 and 2018, and just a comparison between them. But just going through these, you can see that the main worry is security. Security is the biggest concern they have, followed by governance and managing cloud spend and lack of resources. So if you think about what we do as a business unit, we play in each one of these areas. We can help customers with governance. We can help them with security. We got the tools, we got the expertise. We can help them manage their cloud spend. We can help them when they got a lack of resources, where they don't have the expertise in certain aspects. That's where we come in and we sort of add a lot of value to them.
Sorry, Japie. Sue's got a hand up for a question.
Yeah. Can I ask a question, Japie, quickly? So when you talk about hybrid and then you talk about like sort of infrastructure, is there certain products like that are more compatible with certain infrastructure types? So for example, I've put myself in a situation here. So like Microsoft, let's just use this as an example. So Microsoft and Azure are sort of better together, but in the infrastructure world, is it all compatible with each other, or are they better? Do you understand what I'm trying to ask? Like, if the customer says to me, "Oh, I don't know what infrastructure types they are," so if a customer's talking about infrastructure,
I think I know what you're asking, Sue. So basically, that sounds like you're asking me what is better suited for infrastructure as a service versus like a Kubernetes or a containerization platform.
Yes, exactly.
So the easier answer to that is think about traditional applications. So like I showed in the previous slide, if you have a file server, or if you have a mail server, or if you have a CRM server or a SharePoint server and you want to host that, that's suited for infrastructure as a service. An Infor server, infrastructure as a service. Anything that's more modern than that, like a monitoring server, or maybe a custom app where customers can do e-commerce from, anything that's more modern typically goes to containers. And that's why the previous slide, so if I go back to this slide here, you will see that legacy environments are shrinking because file servers don't really exist anymore. People are using Google Drive or OneDrive. Mail servers don't exist anymore. People are starting to use G Suite and Office 365. And similar from a website perspective, those things don't typically exist anymore. It's slowly but surely being phased into applications, and then the rest of the stuff, which is the custom built apps, would be the stuff that they would run as containers.
Okay.
So it's always a good question to ask yourself, listen, so what are they talking about? Is it a big clunky ERP system, or is it something that they're developing themselves? Normally, if it's a self-developed thing, don't even try to talk CPU, memory, and disk, because that's where you'll make a mistake.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that answer it, though?
Yes, it does. Clearer for me.
Good. So I looked at this slide as well, though. So there was a study done by Flexera last year where they took quite a few different respondents from an enterprise environment and sort of asked them all the same questions on each one of these platforms. So are you using it? Are you experimenting with it, or do you plan to use it? And if you look at the responses that they got from that, the majority of the people are using AWS. And there's a portion of that where they still testing with it or planning to use it. And that is shortly followed by Azure, and shortly followed, well, quite distantly followed by Google from that aspect. And I think we see a similar trend in South Africa as well, though. I mean, everything at the moment, you have those conversations, people talk. It's actually weird, though, because it feels to me like they're talking more Azure than AWS, but they tend to use AWS more than Azure. But I think where I find a huge opportunity, where I see there's a lot of opportunity, is these guys that's already using it. That's where we can go and help them with best practices and those sort of things. And the guys that are still busy testing with it, that's where we can sort of play in terms of those fields, and sort of growing out the rest of it. Obviously, I mean, the Google stuff at some point will come as well. I had a discussion with the Google team about. Sorry, man, I just need to cough quickly. I had a discussion with the Google team about a week and a half back with regards to the 2.2 billion rand that they want to spend inside South Africa, in Cape Town specifically. Because initially, when that was sort of was on the radar and in the news, everyone sort of jumped to the conclusion that this is going to be a data center. I mean, looking at 2.2 billion rand, that typically would be enough money to bring up a data center. But speaking to the guys, so the investment they're making on that side is on their network. So they call it the Equiana cable. And this thing is, so the way they explained it to me, if you take all of the other internet, all of the other undersea cables that we have at the moment between South Africa and Europe or the US, and you combine all of their throughputs together at the same time, this thing's about 20 times as fast. They're talking about speeds of up to 120 terabits per second. So it's massive. I then sort of I then took the conversation a little bit further, where I asked him, listen, so you're spending all of this money on the network. Is there talks of a data center? So they can't, same as AWS did back then, where they sort of tongue-in-cheek sort of told you they can't tell you, but they told you in any case, though. So they didn't deny or confirm that they're bringing a data center, but they did confirm, not in so many words. So in my honest opinion, within the next probably 12 to 18 months, there will be an announcement saying that Google data centers are coming to South Africa. And then from a South African perspective, at least, you will see that this Google portion is going to spike up quite heavily as well, because people in South Africa are actually quite interested in Google, funnily enough, even despite the fact that they're not in the data center. I mean, I made an example of takealot.com earlier. So I don't know how many of you know this, but Takealot does not run on Azure or AWS. They run on Google Cloud, despite the fact that Google Cloud is not in South Africa. So when you transact on their application or on their website, it's actually backhauling all of their traffic to Europe somewhere, and it works. There's latency, obviously, but from an end user perspective, you don't see that latency. And the reason why they manage the latency so well is because they have everything in that data center. So if you had the web front end sitting in South Africa and the back end database sitting in Europe, yeah, you would have noticed that latency. But because they have everything tight knitted together, the only latency you will see is 180 milliseconds after you click. And 180 milliseconds is so quick that the normal human would not even notice that. I mean, it doesn't slow down the system, it just slows down that click for you. Okay, let me move to the next slide. I also looked at this slide. So similar, same thing. So Flexera did the same test on the guys last year, and they sort of went through the different products that you typically find on public cloud services to try and figure out which are the top products being used by these enterprises on these public cloud perspectives. And if you look at it right at the top, we've got database as a service. So I spoke about the fact that we're looking at bringing up database services from our side. And I'm actually very excited about that, because for the last couple of years, we've been selling infrastructure and infrastructure services. So we started adding managed services and professional services to it. Look, in the end, it's still infrastructure services, unfortunately. But once we start doing something like database as a service, we sort of start moving up that stack. It becomes what I call advanced managed services, because it's still managed services. You're just managing an application on the infrastructure, really. But looking at what the guys are actually using from that aspect, database is right at the top. And just below that, funny enough, container as a service, which is the other reason why I sort of spent quite a bit of time sort of talking about containers today, because that's where I also see things going from that side, with it being agnostic. And then further down, it's data warehouse, and then database as a service, the NoSQL stuff, and then serverless. So nowhere in this list do they feature infrastructure or compute services, which I found very, very interesting. And a lot of these things are based on data. So there we go, database as a service, data warehouse, database as a service. Serverless, maybe that's not databasing, but caching, Hadoop. So there's a lot of these things that sort of forms part of database services. And funny enough, right at the bottom, you've got a disaster recovery as a service. I say funny enough because all you need is just one natural disaster to occur somewhere, and this thing sort of pumps right to the top again. It's one of those things that's opportunistic. Okay, so I think this is the final slide that I have, but I wanted to show you this as well, though, sort of talking about that end result that I spoke about earlier, where customers don't care about infrastructure, they don't care about applications, they care about the end result, what they can actually show to their customers. And this slide sort of talks exactly to that, where businesses using different cloud computing models to do their software as a service. So 90% of them are using pure software as a service at the moment. 73% of them, I don't actually know percent of what though. I mean, this surely can't be 70% of 100%, and that just wouldn't make up. But 73% are using infrastructure as a service, which is, like I said, this is still a very large portion of it. And it's not going to go away. It's not going to, the fact that it's not going to go away doesn't mean we have to stop the conversation there, though. We always aim to have the conversation higher up the stack. But the infrastructure services will always be there, as you can see by the note here. It's still very, very big in terms of that. And then platform services. And what I find quite funny about this slide, though, is because software as a service typically runs on platform, which runs on infrastructure. And I just thought that was quite interesting. And then getting back to this, and I showed you another slide that said exactly what I'm showing you here as well, though. So the biggest challenges for organization engaged with software as a service today: security, biggest challenge. We've got a solution for that. Governance and compliance, we got people that knows this stuff. Lack of cloud experience, we got people that got a lot of cloud experience. Privacy, they worry about privacy, but this is where the conversation just needs to come in and sort of ease their minds in terms of that. So that's really the barrier at the moment. And then it sort of showed you the growth of companies that's running purely SaaS from 2018 up into their prediction of 2023. So you'll see there's a massive jump between 2018 and 2020. And well, let's say between 2018 and 2021 for that matter. That's a 25% jump. And the reason why there's been this massive jump is simply because of this pandemic that we're in at the moment. Like I explained earlier, you can buy your hardware needs off the Leroy Merlin website or off the Builders Warehouse website. These are the sort of applications that those big corporates are now developing, applications to make transacting with them easier. Because at some point you couldn't go to those hardware stores, or if you went there, you had to stand in a massive queue just to get in, because they can only allow so many people in at a time. So they started developing these online platforms, and that's why you started seeing this boom here, where, like I said, the modern application is not for internal consumption anymore. This is applications being built for our customers to make it easier for them to transact with their own customers. And that's sort of what brought on this boom from that side. And with that, in conclusion, we have really good people. We have exceptional people. We have exceptional technology and knowledge of that. We are obviously in the right place. We are obviously in the right time at the moment as well. All we need to do from our side is start thinking more innovatively and have the right conversations with customers, making sure they are aware of our capabilities and where we can add value. Thank you. Any questions? That was 45 minutes of me just talking. Holy shit.
I have a question, Japie, if I may.
Yeah.
I do like what we're talking about is like managed services and kind of like moving up the stack. I think it's definitely the correct way to do it. So in regards to that, how are we standing with our like managed database platform or managed, I don't know, data platform, managed security platform, managed container platform, or, you know, something like that?
So in terms of the managed database platform, we are busy building out that service at the moment. I mean, we've got guys that's busy studying that stuff at the moment. On the same stream, we've actually got a project running where we're busy building out the product as well in terms of that. Because obviously it's not just having guys that's skilled. We need to, after we get the guys skilled, we need to make sure what the pricing model is, how we define the service, and then go to market with it. So that hopefully would be done within the next month or two, to be deadly honest. So that's one aspect of it. When it comes to the data side of it, there are numerous things happening around there. Unfortunately, it's not all just within our business unit. So that forms a big part of what Varsha and her team is doing. And I've been working very closely with them on this data labs project that we've done for APS in the UK. And we're building out some really, really cool stuff. So I know at the moment we're at a point where this thing is, the minimum viable product is done. We're basically just waiting for them to bring a customer. Once we have the customer, then we can bring this thing out. And it's actually quite a cool little thing. So you log on to this web front end and you, if you don't have a login, you just basically sign up for this thing. And then you go and pick which services you want. You throw data at this thing, and this thing literally analyzes the data and spits out a whole bunch of graphs and stuff for you. So there's a lot of stuff happening from that aspect. And I know from the security side of things, we're also busy having those conversations. I think we don't have security offering as a service just yet. Well, we do, because we do the stuff from a F-Secure perspective as a service for customers. We don't just sell licenses, we actually sell the support from F-Secure and Mimecast as well. So that's already in play at the moment. Yeah, I think that's already in play. So I wouldn't. So the only one that's sort of missing at the moment is probably the data side of things, which I wouldn't say it's missing. It's already in the making. It's just a matter of finding that very first customer to sort of jump onto this thing and start using it.
And how about the containers?
Yeah, that's another one. So that's another one that we're busy talking to at the moment. So at the moment, I'm doing a ton of investigation from my side. Well, it's not just me. It's actually me and a couple of guys in the team that's doing investigations based on the difference between Rancher and OpenShift. And at some point, so there's a thing called Think Tank, an initiative that Richard has started a little bit back, where we are going to start seeing how we get a containerized platform, well, managed containers for people. So I wanted to say unfortunately just now, but it's not really unfortunate. So like I said, Google's got GKE, Amazon's got EKS, Azure's got AKS, and then they all have these managed OpenShift containerized platforms running on their platforms as well. So would we ever go and install our own OpenShift platform and sell it out? That would be reinventing the wheel. I would actually think that would be quite stupid. What we typically would do for customers is probably just help them migrate things into those platforms, because now they have these applications that run in a certain manner. And there's two ways of doing it. You can either convert it and stick it into a container, because that's possible nowadays, or you can refactor it and make it work from that aspect. So those are things we are working on at the moment. And unfortunately, like I said, it is stuff that does take a bit of time, but it is definitely where we're moving to. Funny enough, though, so I spoke to a customer earlier this week around containers, and they asked us, can we do this, without even flinching. I just said, yeah, we can definitely do this. We've done this for so many customers, to the point where I've sold it to him that I'm actually doing a demo for them next week on Rancher. So it is definitely in the pipeline. We don't have it yet, but I'm selling it. I'm already there.
Japie, if I can add
Dude, that's amazing.
if I can add to what
Japie, just out of interest sake, I saw a LinkedIn post from Andy Baker at APSA, raving about Rancher.
Yeah.
So some guy asked a question, if I remember correctly, and Andy responded with like a whole long thing, and basically was like the only way that he's seen this being able to be done is with Rancher. There are other tools, but commercially they don't make sense. And Rancher has given them everything they need. What he was like super. I mean, you guys know him quite well. He's super technical. But he was raving about it, which was quite. I thought that was quite good to read, actually, from our perspective, considering, especially since we pitched that to Capricorn last week, or this week, or when.
Yeah, look, so that's my opinion as well. So I've honestly never really worked on OpenShift, but playing with Rancher, it just makes it so much easier. I mean, if you, well, despite the fact that, so you need to understand Docker, which if you go through the course, it's a 2-hour course. So there's like 5 commands you need to know. It's not that complicated. It's not rocket science. Then you move on from there to a Kubernetes course. Same thing. It's quite a lengthy course. It feels quite technical, but in the end, it's like maybe 7 or 8 commands. It's not that complicated, and it's very similar to Docker. But what Rancher does is Rancher, you install this thing and you point it to your Google cluster. You point it to AKS or GKE or EKS or even your Red Hat stuff, and then you don't even need to know those 7 commands. It's literally click, 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 and things just happen and they spin up. So I'm a big fan of Rancher, to be honest. I think Josh, you had a question.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to add on what Thomas was asking there in terms of containers. It's obviously good technology in terms of clients running new modern applications in that environment. So if we talk about clients migrating into that space of for instance, containers, where do we play in terms of refactoring? Because obviously they will come and say, do you support this? And then we say, yes, we play in that space. In terms of refactoring, because if we refactor applications, we need to understand coding as well. So where do we play in terms of that aspect?
So, sorry, man, I'm dying this side. So in terms of refactoring, I realize coding and all of those sort of things comes into play as well, but we have business units that can help from that aspect. And the reason why, so I've been speaking a lot with a guy called Marco da Costa. I think some of you guys might know him. He is a Red Hat OpenShift. He knows OpenShift really, really well. He's installed this and run this at numerous banks in the past. And when I started having these discussions with MNG, which is in the UK, I included Martin and I included Marco as well, because I knew between the two of them, they will be able to make this work. And what I said to Marco back then is, listen, so this is the requirement. It's going to be a managed Red Hat OpenShift thing running on Azure, but they need someone to help them migrate their current workloads into this. And he said to me, he said the same thing. He said to me, listen, so he's really good at running things and creating those pipelines, but when it comes to application refactoring, there's another business unit, and I can't remember who it was though, but he gave me the name and he said, these are the guys that typically does that. And from our aspect, we don't necessarily need to know how to do these things, to be deadly honest. All we need to do is we need to get the deal, and then we figure it out after that. So I know we don't have the skills to do a managed Kubernetes thing at the moment, even though I'm selling it. I know we don't have the skill to do the migrations, but I know within IOCO, there's definitely the skills do exist. And that's basically where I'm forming from that side. So I don't know if that answers your question, Josh.
No, definitely does. And I know that we do have a dev BU inside IOCO, the IOCO cluster.
Yeah, he actually gave me the name and he said, these are the guys that will be able to do that. And I remember saying to him that I don't really care who does it. I just want to make sure we get the deal. If it's another business unit, that's fine, but let us just get in there. Okay, anyone else? Everyone happy? Cool. Thanks, guys.
Has everyone left?
No, we're still here.
I bored them to sleep.
All good.
So that was a top job.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the beer slide.
Ninja.
Guys, so I realized I spoke a hell of a lot today. And like I said, a lot of the stuff was my opinion. So bear in mind, I am an engineer.
Opinion, Japie.
I'm an engineer by trade. I'm not the guy that I'm not a sales guy that talks to customers permanently. So from my side, this is my take on industry trends from a technical aspect, and it might not be, not all of it might not be as accurate, but it definitely is my opinion on it and the way I see things. But thanks for taking the time and actually listening to me for the last 54 minutes.
Thank you, Japie, for a fantastic presentation.